beaucoup. Good afternoon, everyone. I will introduce quickly Tereza as a student of mine in biology lesson, but mainly today as a member of the Climate Academy we will present today. As you can see on the first slide, Climate Academy is a new pedagogical strategy we are implementing in our European school in Brussels. And I will shortly introduce the European context and the local context in which we are implementing the Climate Academy. And then Tereza will intervene to present you some of the achievements and the perspective as well of the Climate Academy. And then we will conclude with a wider discussion about the absolutely necessity of tackling the climate crisis or climate education in secondary school. So I have already presented what we will talk about. So let's enter in the international and European context. In February 2020, the UN and the University of Oxford launched probably the biggest survey ever about the climate emergency. And during this survey, 1.22 million of participants expressed that a climate crisis should be treated as an emergency, and they rank at 64%, the average of a participant, explaining that it is clearly an emergency. This huge survey took into consideration a lot of criteria, such as region, countries, index development, education level, and age. And if we have a closer look about the age of the participant, we reach 69% of secondary students, 69% of the youngest participants consider climate as an emergency to be treated. So what is the context, the international context of the climate education? In the COP21 in Paris, and following the COP21, we reached the Paris Agreement. And in this agreement, we find Article 12, which clearly explains the role that education should play in the climate education. But to be frank, all concrete applications are still in abeyance in the majority of the national secondary academic programs. So, more specifically, because we are working in a European school, we are following the new framework of the education based on the 8 key competencies for lifelong learning. And these 8 key competencies has been discussed in almost every presentation we have followed from yesterday. And the 8 key competencies split into 4 hard skills and 4 soft skills. And we will in phase that our Climate Academy program is grounded on these competencies. So just to have a short presentation of the European schools system, which is a really specific school system, which has been created about 50 years ago to teach the children from the European institution workers. And by essence, we can say that these schools are multicultural and multilinguistic schools. And you will see that Tereza will prove by herself how the language are well managed by young students. So in our school, in our local context, we are converting some of the skills, the lifelong skills promoted by the European Union, into what we call the life skills. So the life skills is a wheel when we have 8 competencies, social competencies, which can be seen as attitude or abilities to adopt as a student, but also as a citizen. And this attitude take place in this triangular strategy, which every European countries adopt for the secondary education, which is called the KSA strategies. And one more time, as you can see, the knowledge skills are obviously what are really more oftenly taught during the lesson in the secondary school, but also attitude is one of the objectives we have. So one more time, because of this context, the Climate Academy we are developing is embedded in this structure, such that it could be converted and transferred to every European educational system. Let's introduce quickly the Climate Academy by itself. So the Climate Academy stands on 3 pillars, which are the systemic understanding, a civic engagement, and a social entrepreneurship. So Tereza will expose you some of the achievements of the civic engagement, social entrepreneurship, and I will start quickly and let Tereza follow. The systemic understanding we are working on the Climate Academy. So climate change or Climate Academy obviously need science, and we don't provide any data in our Climate Academy, but we use IPBES and IPCC report to have trustful data, and we train students to use this scientific data and to interpret. And one of the biggest advantage of the IPCC report is that it enlarged the scope of the climate crisis, because it provides evidence and sometimes solution in many different expertise fields. So more than science, we need and we work with the student on really specific and complex concepts, but absolutely mandatory to be able to understand when we are talking about climate crisis, such as planetary boundaries or tipping points, which are 2 really important concepts, which are sadly totally absent on every secondary academic program. So that's what we try to do inside the common and current framework of the secondary education, which is usually based on what we call a multidisciplinary organization, where we have different subjects, and sometimes we can bind the subject together for developing a common topic. More and more often, as secondary teachers, we are asked to work into an interdisciplinary organization, which involves one complex competencies and ask different subjects to work together to try to solve or to bring some ideas. But in this diagram, subjects remain clearly defined. What we try to promote with the Climate Academy is a paradigm shift, where one real issues need to be solved by mobilizing a huge amount of knowledge coming from a large range of subjects. So just to finish my first part, in the European school, we have received absolutely recently what we call the Green Comp framework, which is a framework settled by the Joint Research Center in Varese and endorsed by the European Commission, which provide sustainable values and competence to reach. And we see the Climate Academy as a pedagogical tool we can use to implement this strategy inside the schools. So
okay.
It's Tereza.
So the first pillar of the Climate Academy is about developing a systemic understanding of the scientific and social truths posed by the crisis. But this knowledge is pointless if it doesn't lead to a change in attitudes. The Climate Academy is dedicated to developing the skills of civic engagement and social entrepreneurship that are informed by the systemic awareness. Amelie Schaubersberger, a member of the Climate Academy, was invited to attend the pre-COP26 meeting, and she prepared a short speech that she delivered to many experts who valued her input. As the youngest person at the meeting, she carried the core demands of the Academy for strong climate laws. The Climate Academy encourages learning and peer teaching. Students are provided with a full understanding of the severe environmental crisis we are in and awareness of tipping points, and are equipped to address the crisis as a systemic problem instead of focusing on individual action. Students are then able to collaborate with teachers of the school and can move on to teaching younger pupils about climate change, illuminating them on the systemic threats posed by the crisis. In the past, the European 13 Stars newspaper published articles written by the Climate Academy. And today, the Climate Academy works in collaboration with News Decoder, which is a global educational news service that teaches young people journalistic and media skills. Many of the Climate Academy's projects have been published by News Decoder, including a podcast episode on ozone depletion and an article on the climate mural painted in the school. An example of social entrepreneurship is provided by the creation of the Writings on the Wall, which is a mural painted by students to raise a sense of urgency about climate change. Students made use of skills not usually acquired within the school curriculum. They strategized, networked, and planned in order to complete their project. The mural was inspired by Norman Rockwell's painting, The Right to Know, which expressed the right of American citizens to understand the government's actions during the Vietnam War, which the White House tried to suppress. The message of the mural is comparable with The Right to Know because the current educational system doesn't enable students to make informed and constructive responses to climate change, since its systemic nature isn't addressed in school. The faces on the mural represent the economically marginalized people who will be the worst affected by the consequences of climate change. And the data at the top indicates that a cut in 11% of carbon emissions is necessary to meet the 2016 Paris Climate Agreement. Okay. One of the key aspects of climate change that the Climate Academy focuses on is its systemic nature. Individual changes to personal lifestyle are shaped and constrained by the system in which they are made. Therefore, calls for individual action have failed. Instead, radical and systemic solutions are the right way to approach the issue in order to tackle climate change. A story to illustrate the importance of systems thinking is Operation Cat Drop. So in the 1950s, the people of Borneo, a Malaysian island, suffered from an outbreak of malaria associated with mosquitoes. To eradicate the mosquitoes, the World Health Organization came to the island and sprayed copious amounts of insecticide DDT around the island. The mosquitoes carrying malaria died, but so did the wasps that controlled the population of thatch-eating caterpillars. Shortly afterwards, the thatched roofs of the villages started to collapse. The DDT affected other insects of the island that were eaten by geckos. Over time, the geckos accumulated high levels of insecticide in their body. And while they survived, the cats that ate the geckos did not. So with the cats gone, rats began to overpopulate and increase the risk of an outbreak of the plague. So to contain the rat population, the British Royal Air Force came to the island and delivered cats to the island by parachute. The deeply entrenched equilibria of the planet's ecosystems have already been critically disturbed. How many schools are actually progressing their students' understanding of the environment beyond simple primary school type gestures? We should not laugh at Operation Cat Drop too loudly, because if we are only educating young people to engage in recycling waste, then we are selling them short. Students of my age long to understand the bigger picture. If we study complex maths and science, then why aren't we capable of complex thinking about the environment? Students of the Climate Academy participated in a European Soil Observatory conference for young researchers and requested that soils and sustainability become a mandatory topic in the school curriculum, just like genetics are in biology. The World Teenage Reporting Project gave an award to an article on the writings on the wall, written by Climate Academy member Maya Blenkinsop. The Climate Academy uses the scientific data on the Cut 11% website, a platform set up by the founder of the Academy, Matthew Pye. Cut 11% quantifies for each country the carbon emission reduction required to meet the Paris Climate Agreement targets. This data, sorry.
5 minutes, please.
This data has been endorsed by many of the world's leading climate scientists, such as Professor Kevin Anderson of the University of Manchester. Academic authorities of the European schools fully support the Climate Academy and are working on spreading the concept throughout the European school system. And as the founding academy in Brussels, we are dedicated to developing the package of materials that will enable the Climate Academy to become a global catalyst for the profound changes that education must make. It is not enough to postpone these actions to some time in the future. They must happen right now.
So to conclude, we would like to once again explaining how the secondary school system is working on using these silo thinking models, which is really efficient to provide knowledge, but is insufficient when we need to bring to bridge knowledge. So with the Climate Academy, we try to develop this transdisciplinary concept, and our entrance into this cross-cutting work is the working on the Anthropocene concept, which is a quite new scientific concept developed by Crutzen and Stephens, two geologists who defined the Anthropocene as a new geological epoch. But quickly, this concept spread beyond the scientific field and becomes relevant in other subjects. So in the Climate Academy, we invited students to read the book from Jan Angus called Facing the Anthropocene, because it's presenting all the aspects of the Anthropocene and scientific aspect, obviously, and also economical, political aspect. And this Anthropocene concept is absolutely relevant in the secondary school context, because it's provide a safe zone for teachers to tackle climate change. To be concrete, Anthropocene has been defined or encompasses climate, biospheres, and human society issues. And because it's a scientific context or concept, it is easy to handle inside a classroom, but mandatory, we will need to talk about ethics and behavior, and then we will lead to politics. And many studies show that the climate education has a major break, which is the fear for teachers to be considered as political engaged or as activists. By using this Anthropocene concept, it's clarified the situation. And finally, we recently discovered the works of the German sociologist called Hartmut Rosa, and his acceleration concept, which defined the modernity. And this modernity has different symptoms, and this acceleration has different symptoms, and climate crisis is one of these symptoms. And what these accelerations provide is a weakening of political action, because everything goes faster. Politicians are reduced to react instead of acting on the course of history. And with the climate education, we try to draw is to provide this action instead of reaction after events. So the power of Hartmut Rosa's work is also the solution he provides, and he called the solution the resonance, a concept, and the resonance is defined as a concept which is a cognitive, affective, and bodily relationship to the world. And concretely, we in one hand we can act on the world, and in one hand we are affected by what happened in the world, but we can also act. And Climate Academy has act as a resonance to the climate crisis by experiences sensitive feeling, by mobilizing art talent with the Writing is on the Wall project, for example. It empowers students to think and to act. Just quickly, we also want to give perspective for teachers, because on the research paper, we see an incredible increase of scientific papers dealing with climate topics. And for secondary teachers, it is quite impossible to get remain updated about what happened in the research field. That's why in the Climate Academy, we are working on the writing on a textbook for students and for teachers. And this textbook is co-designed and co-created with a student by the main idea is we need only 20 or 30 minutes to work on one chapter, and with reaching 10 or 12 chapters at the end, we could start thinking globally. Finally, to award and to value the engagement of the student, we are working on a certification for the Climate Academy, both at the European school system level, but also with the collaboration of University of Oxford and recently with the United Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicolas.